Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 61 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. Well, we're one day away from the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States, where it's not safe to be a turkey. And as you may have been following in the news, if you're watching from somewhere else in the world, I have been asked to clamp down, put the kibosh on, not meet up with large numbers of people, that sort of thing. So, to try to get the whole COVID situation under control. I've been battling a little bout of bronchitis myself right now, a little chest infection at the moment. I don't believe that it is COVID. I have no idea, quite frankly. I am having a test, not tomorrow morning, but on Friday morning. So I don't have any of the typical symptoms from what I have read in terms of the headaches and all the other things, the fatigue and such, and everything that's associated with it. But I have been working at cleaning out my basement and finding all sorts of dust, and we had a little bit of a mouse problem in my basement a while back, and I guess I didn't clean up as well about that as I thought I had, so we have some work to do there. And I got placed on an antibiotic this morning, as well as some sort of a steroid, something called prednisone, to hopefully knock this bronchitis out. It's something that I typically get every year anyway. It just happens to be now that it has arrived with my my breathing and the change of the weather. So I'm going to battle through this. I think my voice is okay. I've got my cup of water here to go along with the podcast tonight. Now, this is the third of several of the unique episodes that I've done over the last couple of weeks, the interviews. I've got one more set of interviews that I have set aside for episode 62, which I'm going to be working on this weekend as well. But as I draw closer to the one-year anniversary of the podcast, I'm starting to realize again, wow, this has been a year. I cannot believe that it's lasted that long, that I'm still having fun with it. When I first got to the point where I was ready to do a podcast, the thought process was, and everything that I had read was, that the average podcast or the typical podcast peters out or stops after 7 episodes. The person lasts about 7 episodes and then it goes away. They run out of material. They run out of drive or desire to do the podcast. Well, this is number 61 for me, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. But over the last few weeks, as I have been doing, and if you've been listening, you've heard that I've been doing interviews with supporters of a number of different clubs. My goal with this is to find out what they thought about their club's trade period. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to David Lloyd, who is a longtime Port Adelaide supporter and co-host of the Corn the Pear podcast, as well as Max Blake, who is a longtime Cat supporter. So we're going to hit the minor premiership winners of the last 2 years in this episode. And I am going to put a link to the Corn the Pear podcast in the show notes. And it took me a while to figure out what it actually meant, and I think you'll hear in the episode how that name came about. And it's one of those names that I'm thinking to myself after hearing the story behind it, okay, that made a lot more sense than I thought it was going to, because I had no idea where they were coming with the name for that podcast. And this is one that is a podcast that is devoted to the Port Adelaide Power. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the interviews, I wanted to let you know about something that took place over the last 24 hours or so. And I opened up my merch store for the podcast. And currently I have 3 different designs that I have uploaded to the merch store. I had a 4th design uploaded. In fact, I ordered a couple copies of the sticker for that design right after I had set up the store, because I wanted to have one of those stickers to put on my car, to put on my computer, whatever the case may be. But the company that runs the design service here sent me an email saying that there was what they thought was a copyright infringement. They pulled that one down. They said that what I had done with it is I had 4 generic players, and I had a student of mine who is a senior in high school right now that designed 3 different designs for me. And one of the ones is the podcast logo that you see if you're listening to the podcast, which is the one that says the Yank on the Footy and has the little skinny gold guy leaning up against a little background there. That's one that I created on a website myself. That's about as gifted as I am from a technological standpoint. But this young lady did some fantastic designs for me. She had 4 generic players in generic Guernseys. I said, mix up the combinations, the colors, that sort of thing. I don't want it to look like anything that is actually in play because I don't want to have any sort of copyright infringements. So they're all kind of on the screen and they're looking kind of up at a ball. And the top of the ball says a Yank on the Footy podcast. And then it had the logo, which is the red, white, and blue logo with the AFL taken out of it. And my Twitter handle at Yank_on in there. And I guess the AFL was concerned about that looking too much like their logo. So they went ahead and pulled it down. So I'm going to send her an email this weekend and see if she can retool that and pull the red, white, and blue off of there and just leave the Twitter handle there. And I don't think it should be a problem because it's just a generic Sharon. There's no text that looks like the Sharon text or anything of that nature. I mean, I have a burly AFL ball about 6 feet away from me right now, socially distancing itself from me. But the storefront is open, and if you're interested, like I said, there are the 3 different designs. I added a few different items on there that I thought were interesting, like shirts and stickers, and if somebody was at all interested in like a coffee mug or that sort of thing. But the company that I'm doing my storefront with, and I may actually do a second one as well, is somebody called Redbubble, which is a neat company because what they do is they print on demand. You upload your work, your design, and then they print the stuff when somebody orders it. Now, they have all sorts of different products. So if you happen to go and look at the storefront, and I hope that you do, you're going to see all sorts of different things on there. You're going to see blankets and shower curtains. I didn't set those things up to be part of my storefront, but they automatically included those. So I don't care how devoted a fan you are of the podcast and you really enjoy it and you're listening to it on a regular basis. I sure as heck don't encourage you or think that you're going to be somebody who would buy a Yank on the Footy podcast shower curtain. I wouldn't even put one in my house. But it's there, and I guess they have all sorts of other designs, thousands of different things as well. Now, I will mention also, if you are somebody who's into having stickers on your laptop computer or on the window of your automobile or your pickup truck or, that sort of thing, this website has all kinds of different stickers for pretty much every club that's out there. I ordered some Geelong stickers a while back as I'm a Geelong supporter. But I actually, when I ordered a few stickers for my own podcast, I ordered an Essendon sticker for one of my coworkers, actually the principal of the school where I teach, because he's begun to follow the game pretty closely, and he's decided that he wants to become a Bombers supporter. So I picked up a Bombers sticker for him, and I'm going to give that to him so he can put that on his truck if he wants to, or on his laptop, or whatever the case may be. But one of the neat things about Redbubble, and I think a lot of the other companies do as well, is that when they print on demand, they print in different places around the world. They have printing facilities, not just in the United States, but they have a printing facility in Australia as well. They have printing facilities in a couple different countries in Europe as well. So if you find yourself at all remotely interested in a t-shirt or some stickers or something of that nature for the podcast, I'm pretty sure that they will print them right there in Australia. So you would get them, if you decide to get yourself a Christmas present, they will get them printed right there in Australia. And I believe that their printing facility is in Melbourne, because I checked into this before I decided on which one I wanted to go with. And of course, then I realized that, well, you know what? They don't even actually print shirts that I would fit into, because I'm not exactly what you would call skinny. That's why I like to watch the game and talk about it a little bit, because it would be completely ugly if I was to actually go out there and try to play it. So I hope you'll consider taking a look. Any funds that I bring in, if I make anything on this, I plan on putting right back into the podcast to help make the podcast better as I move into my second year. Possibly upgrading equipment, paying for the podcast hosting sites to try to get a new web page up and running. I have a web page parked on GoDaddy.com. I just have not gone live with it because I'm not a web page designer. I started on one, and I guess I didn't save it because all the stuff that I had done disappeared. So, as I'd mentioned before, I'm coming up on the first anniversary of the podcast. And again, if you want to just go look and see what's on there, I will let you know that the designs that are there. One of them is the logo that you see on the podcast if you're listening to it right now. I did add on there my Twitter handle, the at @yank_on. I did plug that on there as well. But then I also have the couple of taglines that I use during the podcast. The Australian rules football. It's why they invented the DVR. And I also have one that she designed that I think is really neat looking. The may your dribble kick never hit the post. She did a really neat design with that, I think. So I'm pleased with it. I hope you'll find it interesting as well. But again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying, hey, please go do this. But check it out. If you're interested, that's great. If you're not, that's okay too. It's not costing me anything to put the stuff out there other than a little bit of time. And like I said, if you find something that you're interested in that you want to get or get for some friends or whatever the case may be, or cover the entire back window of your car with stickers. Okay, I wouldn't recommend that, but you get the idea. I'd be very grateful, but I'm not begging or pleading. It's there. If you want to check it out, that's fantastic. But as I was saying, December 29th is the first anniversary of the first episode of the podcast. And right now I'm at the point where I'm working at reaching my goal of 10,000 downloads for the anniversary date. Now, I'm a small podcast. There are some podcasts that they put a new episode out. They've got 10,000 downloads in the first 20 minutes. I'm not that person. I'm not going to be that person. It would be great if I was, but I'm a realist. I know that that's not going to be the case. But that doesn't mean I'm not having fun doing this. So I'm having an absolute blast doing this. But like I said, my goal is to get to 10,000 downloads by the 29th, which is about 33, 34 days from now. I'm a little over 600 downloads away. So I hope to be putting out at least another 5 or 6 episodes before that time is up, maybe more, which, might help pad the stats a little bit, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to put out lousy episodes just to pad the stats. I'm not doing that at all. I'm trying to put out a good product, a good podcast that people are interested in listening to. And if I get to the 10,000, that's fantastic. If I don't reach that goal, then I don't reach that goal. But I'm hoping to. So I hope you'll enjoy the show. And I hope you'll share it with your friends and family. So sit back and relax and enjoy my discussions with David and Max. Now, before I begin, however, I do want to wish Max and his bride a happy second anniversary. So I hope you two had a wonderful anniversary. I saw the post that you had online. It looked like you were having a great time there. So happy anniversary to the two of you. And let's enjoy the podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is a big Port Adelaide Power supporter, and I'd like to welcome Dave Lloyd from Adelaide onto the show. Dave, I appreciate you reaching out. It's great hearing from people literally all over the nation, the country of Australia, as well as other places around the world. So thank you very much for reaching out, sir. Glad to have you on board.
Not a problem, Craig. Thank you for having me. Look forward to having a bit of a chat about Port Adelaide's off-season and what we've done in the trade period before our national draft in December.
You bet. Absolutely. It's been, they finished up as the minor premiers this year. They had a fantastic year. Yes, they didn't make it to the grand final, but I think in the great grand scheme of things, knowing what went on, I think any team that made finals, their supporters had to be pretty thrilled about that. And you guys had a dynamic year this year. So
absolutely, after a few lean seasons with no finals action, to introduce a few kids into the squad and then play finals and then win a final. Ultimately didn't go through to the grand final, but yeah, very happy with the year, seeing us finish top and then win a final. Great experience for some of the younger guys in the squad.
And in many ways they were kind of under the gun, if you will, because from everything that I had read and was alluded to, Ken Hinckley was kind of told, you're making finals this year or you're not going to have a chance to make finals next year.
Yeah, absolutely. The squad, I think most experts around the league would believe that the squad Port Adelaide have had for the last 5 years has been good enough to play finals. Our best football has certainly been good enough to beat the top teams, which we've done over the last few years, whether it's been the Richmond or Hawthorn or Collingwood or West Coast of the competition. Our very best football has been able to compete with them and beat them. It's been our inconsistency, and that certainly led to us either not making finals or just scraping in previous years. And Ken Hinkley, as senior coach, was certainly under no disillusions. If we didn't play finals this year, somebody else was going to have his job next year. And when there's only 18 of those jobs around the world, he wanted to hang on to it. And I think the players did as well. I think that reflected how we played this year. The players really played for the coach and for each other.
Yeah, he seems to be, in many cases, similar in terms of the relationship between the players and himself. There's some parallels between he and Chris Fagan. It looks like the players genuinely love him. Yeah,
absolutely. His time at Gold Coast, he spent some time as an assistant with the Gold Coast Suns, and also at Geelong, where he played his playing days. And whenever you hear any players that have been involved with either of those organisations speak about Hinkley, they speak with him about him in glowing terms, just as the Port Adelaide players do. That he's very good at building relationships, becomes a father figure for many of the younger players. Obviously, many of them are drafted at 18 years old, leave their home state, and become a foster child for families and coaches. And he's got a rapport that across the league is acknowledged as being very good when it comes to developing relationships with players.
So I'm thrilled that that's going to be able to continue, and I would imagine as a Port supporter, you've got to be pretty happy that he's still going to be there as well.
I am. I was fully supportive of the stance the club took, though. If we didn't make finals, it was going to be time for somebody else. Ken had been in the job for several years. I, like many others, believed that our squad was good enough to be playing finals. We'd certainly demonstrated in individual matches that we were good enough to play finals and win finals, and that we hadn't quite got there. I was of the belief that if we hadn't played finals this year, that it was time to look elsewhere. But ultimately, Ken has got us across the line this year, played finals, and on the flip side, I'm happy that he continues on because I think he's got us on the right path now.
Terrific, yeah. And the trade period ended. You guys, Port Adelaide did not make a huge amount of moves, but they made what I think could probably be called some pretty impactful moves for them. They brought in Alir. They gave out a second-round pick for him. And Razio Fantasia came over for the Bombers along with a late-round pick for pick 29 and then a third-round pick later on, I think next year or the year after. I'm not sure. When the trade period ended, what was your gut reaction, your first reaction to everything? Were you pleased with what occurred?
I was. In the first instance, I don't think we had a huge list of requirements. If you were going to write out a shopping list for Port Adelaide, what was it that we needed? I wouldn't have had too many on there. One of them would have been a big-bodied utility to take over or sort of fill in for the role that Justin Westhoff had played for 280 games, who retired at the end of this year. So bringing in Alir at 195 centimetres, 97 kilos. He's probably a bit, not quite as tall as Justin Westhoff, but certainly a larger frame. And we also lost Jack Watts to retirement, a former number one pick who had joined us from the Melbourne Football Club a couple of seasons ago. He had a terrible injury last year, broke his lower leg really badly. And albeit that he was seen as a key forward, we sort of moved him into that tall utility in defence. He, much like Alir, 196, 90 kilos. So we really needed someone to be a swingman that could play back, forward, potentially pinch hit in the ruck. And Alir was targeted fairly early, I think, by the club, and we went after him, and we were successful in getting him. I think we got him, to be blunt, dirt cheap. He was in contract. Sydney, I don't think wanted to let him go and to get him for a future second rounder, which if we play to our potential next year, finish somewhere near the top of the ladder, could be pick 35 to 40, somewhere around that mark.
That's not a bad
if he'd
deal.
said if he'd said we'd get Aaliyah for that, I would have taken it. Fantasia, a little bit of mixed emotion for me there, because I can't question our recruiting of our club over the last couple of years. We've been fantastic at the national draft, bringing in as much young talent as we have. I think Fantasia has a huge upside. It's certainly a position that we needed some depth. Brad Ebert played as a taller forward around that sort of 190 centimetre mark, which is what Fantasia, not quite that tall, but Brad Ebert played that sort of forward into the midfield role. I guess Motlop plays a similar role, Stephen Motlop, and also Kane Farrell, but Kane Farrell's a young developing player, and Motlop at 29, about to turn 30, is at the end of his career. So bringing in Fantasia was a very much targeted pick to bring in someone with some experience, 80 games, 25 years old. He can sort of step into that role that Ebert, Motlop played, and then we've got a couple of younger guys developing behind him. So, yeah, savvy recruiting for that one. I'm not sold. He has had a lot of injury issues, but our injury record and performance over the last 2 to 3 years has been exceptional. So hopefully we can get his body right. Hopefully he gets in a good headspace being back in his home state, and we get the best out of him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what were your expectations for the two of them, and you covered that pretty well there. See, I thought Lear is not a bad person to have backing up your number one ruck. He does a pretty decent job in that position. And Fantasia, when he wasn't getting pinched by Ben Stratton, like he was a couple of years ago, Stratton just left him just black and blue that one game. That was that one game, as a Cat supporter, and I came to the game just like 4.5 years ago, so I don't have that in my DNA where I hate another club. I like watching good footy, whoever's playing. Of course, I want my club to win. But that I understood why Geelong supporters dislike Hawthorn after watching what had gone on there. But he does flash. He's got a lot of
absolutely. He's got a lot of tricks in his kit bag as well. He's what you would call a explosive small forward. He has a lot of skill. He was highly touted as a junior, so went fairly well in the draft year. I do think he's got a lot of upside. I wasn't sure that we needed him, but as I said, I'm going to put my faith in the recruiting team on this one and bow to their much better judgment and see what we get out of him in the years to come. Obviously, we were not particularly active in trades, but we did bring a couple of late picks in to help us with our points in the draft coming up.
Right. You were going to say about Hawthorn a second ago there. You started to say something about Hawthorn.
Yes, yeah, Hawthorn.
Maybe you don't want to now. I don't know.
Hawthorn are very easy to dislike. They've been very strong for a long time. Through the 80s, they were a very strong side, probably had one of the greatest teams on the park throughout the 1980s, late 80s and early 90s. They were just strong across every line. They had stars on every line. They were super strong. They had a bit of a lean patch in the early 2000s where they managed to get themselves some really high-end draft picks, and the likes of Lance Franklin now at Sydney, and Jared Roughead and Jordan Lewis, Sam Mitchell, those guys who led them to their three-peat earlier this decade. Any team that wins 3 in a row, as you can imagine, the chest gets puffed out a little bit. So it's fairly easy.
And they've earned the right to do that, of course. Yeah, that's
absolutely. But Australians are well known for having a bit of a tall poppy syndrome. So you win 3 premierships in a row, and you have a target on your back.
Yep, exactly. Now, was there anybody you were looking at on your own, thinking, "Boy, I hope we can pick this player up"? Was there anybody that you were hoping the club was going to target?
Look, there were a couple of free agents that were on the market who I could think that Port Adelaide could do with. It was obviously very late in a very tumultuous trade period for Collingwood. Adam Treloar was a player who I thought Port Adelaide could deal certainly add to our list. He's a outside mid, carries the ball well, a fair bit of pace. That would be someone who I could see fitting into our side. But I guess from a key position point of view is typically what AFL fans look at. They're the ones that take a little longer to develop. I'm pretty happy with our big man stocks at the moment. I don't think we need a lot other than that utility that I mentioned. And I perhaps didn't have Aliir on my radar, but when his name came up early in the rumours that roll around on the Twitter feed, I certainly was all on board because I think he can add a lot to our side. I think he's got a real upside. And I'd like to add for that off-field, Port Adelaide has a real connection with community and our Indigenous community, and we are very proud of the programs that our club runs within our Indigenous community and our wider community. And from what I understand, Aliir is a stand-up individual off the field who's going to add a lot to our cultural significance that we hold very dear at the Port Adelaide Football Club. And I think that may have helped or perhaps even aided us with targeting him. He sounds as though he's a really good guy off the field who's going to add a lot to that part of our club as well.
That's fantastic. And that's one of the things that way back when I started this podcast in December of last year, I talked about how I really thought that the relationship, and again, I've never seen a game in person, but just from what I have read and what people have told me, that the interpersonal relationship between the clubs and the supporters of the clubs is unlike anything that we have here in the States. It doesn't exist here in the States the way that it does with the AFL. And it's really neat to see that.
I think that comes from a grassroots level. I've got an interest in baseball, so I keep an eye on the major league over there. And I've had some of my son's friends have gone over and had a go at trying to get themselves into some of the minors and not having an understanding of what happens at grassroots level within the baseball world. From what I understand, you sort of have your midweek, your office leagues, if you like, where it's potentially workplaces against each other. It seems very foreign to me because the grassroots Australian football at the suburban level is tribal. Within the South Australian, just within our greater metropolitan area here in Adelaide, there's 8 leagues with 10 teams in each league. Many of them have a reserve grade as well. So you might have your A grade or your senior team playing Division 1, then your Division 1 reserves is your B grade, as we call it. And then in Division 7, they may have a C grade, and Division 7 reserves a D grade. So quite a few suburban clubs here have 4 senior men's teams.
Okay.
And then that goes through to the South Australian National Football League, or the SANFL as it's known, which is the state league. And those are suburban, so Port Adelaide and West Adelaide and Glenelg and Norwood, suburbs around Greater Adelaide. And that is tribal. You're born into that. If you choose to support another team, you'd probably be looking for foster parents to move out. and that has gone through to AFL level because the VFL, as it was, expanded to the AFL, and those teams like Essendon and Carlton and Collingwood, they've hated each other for generations. That's the connection with the community. The clubs have always been very accessible. Being able to go and see, 10 years ago, you could go after a game and players would actually get presented within the club rooms, and coaches would talk about how they played, and players would be able to mingle with the supporters, and they'd get direct feedback from the supporters, whether it was good or bad. So there's a real connection with community for all clubs.
Yeah. Do you? And maybe this is you said you follow the sports here a little bit in the U.S. The salaries that U.S. sports pay the athletes, and it all comes from the television contracts and that sort of thing, are astronomically high. I mean, huge. The guy who's the worst player on the Major League Baseball roster is making a league minimum of about $400,000 a year. And that's kind of a middle of the road average salary of a 2, 3, 4, 5 year player in the AFL. So my thought on it is that in many cases the sports here in the U.S., they've kind of priced themselves out of being involved with the fans, because they're in many cases extraordinarily wealthy, and they're off doing their thing, and seeing the stuff that people post on Facebook and such about, hey, I saw such and such a player, at the grocery store today, and we talked for a couple minutes and I snapped a quick picture of the two of us, that sort of thing. That doesn't happen here in the U.S. I have never seen a fan do that here with an athlete here in the U.S.
Look, what you just said there, I live really close, about a 5-minute walk from the Port Adelaide home base, our training facility at Alberton Oval. I live in Alberton, so I'm only 5 minutes away. And during the season before the COVID bubble was implemented, and over the last few years, our captain, Tom Jonas, I'd see Tom pretty much every Monday morning at the local cafe, where I'd grab a coffee on my way to work. I'd buy him one if we had a win, and he'd buy me one if we had a loss, and have a bit of a chat about the game and how we saw things. And occasionally see the media manager there, Ken Hinkley, from time to time, with assistant coaches having a coffee. They're very accessible, and I agree. I think the game, albeit they can earn a very good living. Upper echelon of players would be on, that $800,000 to $1 million a year. Very few, but the bulk of them probably around that $500,000 to $600,000 mark, which here in Australia is a very good living, and can live yourself a very comfortable life on that sort of income. Mm-hmm. They're still very accessible, and I think really important that fans have access to them, because I think it keeps them grounded. It keeps them level-headed. They understand that what they're doing, they're privileged to do it. And people live their life wrapped around it. Their emotions come Monday morning when they head off to work are based on the game on the weekend. And I think the multi-millionaire players in the US sports are completely detached from reality, and perhaps don't understand the emotional roller coaster that fans are on, and become a little bit detached from what reality actually is.
That's one of the reasons why and granted, I'm not there in person seeing the games, but it's one of the things that really drew me to this, is just seeing that level of fan interaction. That is so impressive. I have there's a gentleman that lives in Florida who's a Bulldogs fan, and he made a trip to, and I would argue he probably has more Bulldogs swag at his house than any Western fan that lives in Melbourne. He has something new every day that he's posted online, and it's terrific for him. But he made a trip in 2018 to go watch a couple of games in Australia, and the cheer squad welcomed him with open arms, bringing him on the field to hold the banner before the game, sitting him in the front row with the cheer squad during the game. It was just like, it was so impressive that they embraced him. And I can only imagine that happens with probably every club with supporters who are, coming into the game. And it's just really neat to see.
Yeah, absolutely. We, I've been privileged enough to go around the country and see games at different stadiums. Got exactly that at the Optus Stadium against the West Coast Eagles. Got out on the ground and hold the banner up before the game, and it's the fans make the game, and I think we saw that earlier this year when the games were being played in front of empty stadiums. It just didn't quite have the same feel as what it does when there's people there with the emotion that is attached to it. Clubs, and I think the term club is really important, because you're a member of a club, as opposed to being a supporter of an organisation. There's a huge difference.
Right. And this past year, this will be my second year being a member of the Cats, and it's exciting to be able to do that. Because even if you're 15,000 kilometers away, you still kind of feel like you're part of the group.
Absolutely,
that's kind of neat to be able to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we covered everything that I wanted to get into. Great that we were able to dig into some of these other topics. I know you've got some phone calls that you have to get back to. So I do.
Well, that's fine. Look, just
go ahead.
Just quickly, just want to have a quick chat. With the draft coming up, our national draft, Port Adelaide
I completely forgot about that.
That's all right. They don't get a pick till pick 35. But what will probably happen is in the local competition, the Sandful, a young chap called Lockie Jones is part of Port Adelaide's Next Generation Academy. He is an Indigenous player who we have put through local scholarship program, if you like, at schools. Our Next Generation Academy promotes education within our Indigenous community. He's been a part of that program. He's a man-child at 18 years old. He's about 90 kilos, 190 centimetres, so he's built to play senior football straight away as a small defender, perhaps midfielder. He'll probably get called out early in the draft, probably in the top 15, maybe around the 10 to 12 mark. Whilst Port Adelaide don't have a pick in that range, what we will do is we can match that bid with points. Each draft pick is allocated a points value, and someone will probably call his name at around pick 10 or 12, and what we'll do is we'll bundle up all of our later picks in the draft, collate those points together and match that bid. And I would suggest during our draft, it'll be very few players come on board. But, yeah, Lockie Jones is a player who will very much be targeted by Port Adelaide. And I think, as I said, probably be in the top 10 or 12. But we'll match that bid and have him join our club over the summer.
Terrific. I've watched some video of the drafts on YouTube because it is, other than trying to figure out what a held ball is, it might be the most confusing thing that the AFL offers to somebody who hasn't followed the game for very long. The father-son thing and the academy stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah, look, unfortunately, it's just as confusing for someone who lives at. Not all clubs have the same father-son qualification. So the Victorian clubs, who are recognised as, let's call them the original clubs, they have different father-son criteria than the clubs outside of Victoria. The clubs within New South Wales and Queensland have academies that are slightly different to what South Australia and Western Australia have with Next Generation academies. There is no consistency. Hopefully that one day becomes a little more clear and consistent across the league. But at the moment, yeah, our players come through what we call our Next Generation Academy. And, yeah, Lockie's been part of that for a little while, and probably have an 18-year-old come into the squad who is ready for playing at senior level straight away, just as several other guys have done in the last year or two.
Terrific. And it's neat seeing that you're able to, keep in some instances, the local kids or the kids that you help to develop into the young players. It's almost like the minor leagues in baseball in a way, except they're, the minor leagues in baseball, They're already part of your organization. This way, you've still got to go and bring them on board.
Exactly, and he's a Port Adelaide supporter as a child, so he'll be very happy to don the Guernsey one day for Port Adelaide, I'm sure.
I have to tell you though, I do think that that Port does have one of the top three Guernseys. I think that the uniforms they wear are really sharp. It's a really sharp looking uniform. The color combination's really
great.
Unique.
Simplicity often can be the best thing, and very simple V, and I love our home Guernsey. Yeah,
terrific. Well, Ladies and gents, I want to thank Dave Lloyd, big Port Adelaide Power supporter, for coming on. You gave me a lot of insight in terms of how the Sandful works and how Port is still primed to go ahead and make a push for the premiership this year. And I think they're gonna be up there towards the top. Unfortunately, I think we both have to agree. Our clubs are both pushing there. I think we both got to get past Richmond if that's going to happen. But
absolutely,
yeah. So, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on, sir. Thanks so very much. It was a lot of fun. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is a local footy commentator from the Geelong area. He's a huge Cat supporter, and he popped up on the screen, had his Cats hat on, so I decided to put my Cats hat on as well. I'd like to welcome Max Blake to the podcast. Max, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you reaching out, sir.
No problem, mate. Great to be here and great to be talking Geelong Footy Club in November.
Yeah, that's terrific. I have about 6 or 8 different podcasts that I have bookmarked on my computer that are all footy related, and I'm always looking for the latest episode to come out. It is a little strange to talk about footy at this time of year, but it's been kind of a busy last couple of weeks for the Cats, and maybe more so than possibly any other club except for the Bulldogs and whatever the Magpies are doing.
Now that's been funny. I know you're in America at the moment, but the talkback radio, the AFL do everything possible to stay relevant this time of year. And there's a little bit of a conspiracy that this was all Collingwood and the AFL were all set this up just so the AFL can stay in the news for an extra few days. And the Collingwood fans have been very vocal down here over the last 4 or 5 days.
Yeah,
It's been good.
I've spoken to one supporter who's not a big fan of what went on, but I have somebody else who's scheduled to come on that likes the moves that the Magpies made. So yeah. I'm really looking forward to hearing their viewpoint on and their reasoning as to why they feel that way. So now that the trade deadline has passed, what are some of the first words that kind of pop into your head about how the trade deadline ended up and the results from it?
I think all it says is the chips are in. The chips are in. All the cards are on the deck. We've put out a full shuffle. We have now, probably for the first time in the Chris Scott era, I think the club is got some pressure on them. They've got pressure from the players and more importantly, the coaching staff as well too. So it seems like anything under a prelim final next season would be disastrous. But yeah, they've decided to wipe away their draft picks. They've gone and recruited 30-year-old players when there was probably a potential that they could have got a couple of players in the mid-20s, but they have gone for short-term rather than long-term. I like it. Probably about when we lost to Port Adelaide in that qualifying final, I thought, oh, here we go again. Maybe it was time for a little bit of a reset, but I think things changed when Jeremy Cameron said, yep, I'm coming to the club. When you've done that, I think, your strategy has to change. And, Higgins and I think Smith was just the nice little knife set that you got with the Higgins and Jeremy Cameron package. And, the chips are in. It's exciting times here at Geelong. And, the pressure is definitely going to be on the club for season 2021. So
do you think that Isaac Smith's role is going to be less important than say, Higgins and most assuredly Cameron's role?
Yeah, I think so. I think I could potentially – I was talking to a couple of good mates of mine yesterday about it, and I could potentially see him in and out of the side throughout the year. We've got a couple of, big wingmen. Menegola is an excellent wingman. And I know he got a bit of criticism about it last year in the prelim against Richmond, but Blitzarv's on the wing this year was pretty good. I think it just makes a big man that can take the mark on that wing side and set him up to go inside the forward 50. But I guess with Harry Taylor leaving, he's going to go back down to fullback where, that's probably his strong card. But the good thing about Higgins and Smith is they're 2 elite kicks, and it's something when the pressure's on Geelong, our kicking goes wayward and it becomes turnover city. But having those 2 guys in that are just really elite kicks, what it could potentially do is those 2 being mature players, they can actually teach their craft to some of our younger players, like a Sam Simpson, who is pretty good by touch. Like his one little 15 disposal kicks, 15-metre kicks are pretty good, but he's also, I think his efficiency level is pretty low. So if Sean Higgins can sort of teach him the craft, Sammy Simpson, I think is going to be one of those players that could potentially be a Brownlow medalist if he can get those attributes right. So it's, a good 3 players to come in, and it's also, they can teach the craft to the younger players.
Now, do you think that they mortgaged or do you think that they mortgaged too much of the future in the Cameron deal? Yeah.
I reckon that clubs they hold draft pick. I think they overrate draft picks a fair bit now. You take a look at the Essendon Western Bulldogs deal and the Adam Sard one. They want pick 8 and they want to swap pick 7 for Josh Dunkley and all this stuff. You take a look at the list of Geelong's first round picks and they're all not there anymore. So,
Exactly.
I take an established 500 goal kicker for 3 first-round picks any day of the week.
Okay.
You know what you're going to get with Jeremy Cameron. You know that he's going to instantly make your club better. Those 3 picks could have easily been players that, could potentially have played 200 games. Yeah, that's, I guess, the lottery. But then to get a player like Jeremy into the side is sensational. But the thing is, though, we've got 2 second-round picks for next year off him. So
exactly.
we end up with a first-round pick next year's draft plus 3 second-round picks. So, and then this year's draft is going to be compromised heavily. So those picks that we had could potentially going to be in the 20s anyway. So, it's going to be a hard one. It's going to be interesting to see how the draft actually goes. But I reckon a lot of the 18-year-olds that potentially could have got drafted in the Victoria area this year might not get drafted at all. And then they'll go into the next year's draft as 19-year-olds and then potentially going to be picked up in the 20s and the 30s. So
and
we've got about 15 players on the list anyway that's under 22. So not too bad.
And hopefully be more physically mature also and be ready to handle the rigors of playing, in the VFL or at the AFL level.
Well, that's it. And we've had a year where we didn't have any VFL, and they've had these scratch matches where they've been playing on fields that aren't actually the size of AFL grounds. So, and that's why I think the criticism with Jordan Clark, didn't get much of a go this year, but you've seen the size of him. He's a stick.
That's
and
true.
we've been putting a lot of time into Sam Simpson. When he first debuted, 4 years ago, he was a size of a stick as well. And look at him now. He's a clone of his old man. So I think they've just been patient with Jordan Clark, and whoever was going to get drafted this year weren't going to get any game time this next year either because of the players that we've brought in and the players that are already in line. So Charlie Constable, Brandon Parfitt will get more game time. Sam Simpson as well, potentially Cooper Stevens as well. He's one that I reckon would hopefully be challenging for round 1.
Yeah, that would be terrific if he was able to do that. It's, it kind of leads me to wondering then, do you think that well, let me ask it this way, how long do you think that the premiership window for the Cats is open with the list they have right now?
It's a good question. It's probably on at about 5 to 12. I think they've got 2-year window with this group, but then someone retires and then the club just goes and targets that position again. So the window can just – I'm one that sort of doesn't – there's sides that generally can't win the premiership, and that'll be next year North Melbourne and Adelaide. But there's always a bolter. Like the Western Bulldogs came from nowhere. Richmond came from nowhere to win a premiership, and look at them now. They're set up this unbelievable dynasty. So, you sort of look at Hawkins probably is the next one that probably retire, and probably, I guess, Lockie Henderson as well. But then, if Lockie retires at the end of next year, what's to say that Geelong doesn't go after a Tom Doedee from Adelaide and bring him back home to Geelong? Tom Hawkins is retiring in a couple of years' time, or potentially Jeremy Cameron's going to fit that role. We've got Nathan Kruger, we've got Azava Radaglia. So the club does really good at filling in those little potholes. Gary Ablett retired and Sean Higgins has come to the club 2 years. So, I guess the window could potentially stay open. And then, realistically, when Zach Tilley retires, Jordan Clark's going to fill that void. And Joel Selwood as well. We've got Cooper Stevens. And then the possibility, just keep it on your hat, but Zach Merritt's a free agent next year. He's from down this way as well. He's an instant player that can replace Joel Selwood. So that could probably potentially someone that the Cats could target as well. So, window could be possibly open, but it depends what happens. I think if they catastrophically go down the ladder this year, or next year, there could be a one of those, rebuilds, or not rebuilds, but just a reshuffle.
Yeah, I was just looking at I have my other screen open here, and I was looking at the list. I didn't realize that Jeremy Cameron was as tall as he was.
Yeah, he's a giant.
Yeah, he's only 2 centimeters shorter than Tom Hawkins. So I didn't realize there was that big of a drop off. And I'll tell you, I'm really excited to watch the two of them playing side by side, because to me, that in the last couple of years has been one of the biggest opportunities, for success that Richmond has had with Jack Rewalt and Tom Lynch together. Because, the clubs are having to figure out, okay, who am I going to defend? And then while that's going on, you've got somebody that's rolling through there, that's picking up any mongrel ball that's laying around and kicking goals in Dusty Martin. So it's,
that name gives me the shivers, Dusty Martin.
What's that?
Gives me the shivers.
No, I know it does, but I mentioned this in an episode last week or the week before, and I qualified it saying I'm in no way making a comparison to the two players, because this player is not on par with him at all. But I can see Brian Myers start to fill a little bit of a role like Dusty Martin does, with just how quick he is inside, and just be able to, the way he kicks the ball anyway, that it's already coming off at those odd angles as it is. Even just on a small way, he could, kind of be like a Cats version or a miniature version of Dusty Martin for the Cats. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year next year.
Yeah, I reckon he had a weird year this year, didn't he, Grind? He sort of had some games where he did play really well, and then there were some games where you just went, oh, why is he in the side? And the grand final sort of just summed up the year. He had really good moments, and he just had really bad moments. But I think, he's going to be 4th year in the system next year, 3rd year probably as a senior player. He's pretty durable. But, I think they need to probably make him an inside 50 player. But, I agree with you. He could be potentially I don't know if you remember, but Ronnie Burns was one of those players where he'd get 8 touches, but he could absolutely destroy an opposition. And he cannot touch the ball for 3 quarters, and he'll kick 4 goals in the last quarter. And Grind could potentially be that sort of player. And, he's going to love crumbing it off Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron as well too. And we've got a lot of players in that boat. So you think Brad Close as well, Dalhouse could potentially... Yeah, Gary Rowan as well. It's going to be interesting to see where Gary plays next season, because, is it too tall if you're going to have those 3 players in that one side? But Gary comes from my old hometown in Cobden, and he got picked up by the Falcons from playing in defence a senior year at the Cobden Bombers. So he could potentially be a player that can be running off the half-back line as well too. His speed is, phenomenal. He's the fastest player at Geelong.
Right.
So, I agree with Grind. I just think he just had, a few tweaks during the preseason and he's got a great footy brain, natural football brain. He knows where to go. Sometimes a little bit, forward thinking, and he stuffs it up, but he's only a young player. So, in 2 to 3 years' time, he's going to be sensational.
And one of the things that I have continually heard mentioned about him is that, and again, I've not watched these players playing at the younger levels. I just don't have that opportunity to do that. But I've seen said a number of times where they said that he grew up playing as a forward rather than as a midfielder who they're trying to turn into a forward. So he's already got that's not a new skill set that he's trying to develop. It's something that he's done all through his formative years of playing the game. He's played up there, close to the goal instead of, playing at the midfield level.
Yeah, and he kicked 6 goals in the grand final for the Falcons, and all of them were, up against the boundary. Amazing goals of the year stuff. So, yeah, he's just that natural player, and he does definitely remind me of Stephen Milne, who played at St Kilda. I think he kicked 500-600 goals as a small forward pocketer. So it can be achievable. But yeah, I just think, I think they sort of probably put too much on his plate, and he just needs to probably, just focus on that inside 50 role. But he's pretty elite running around the ground too, because he seems to get a lot of the footy inside the defensive 50, and he seems to, at the end of the play is inside the 50 too. So his running capacity is pretty strong, and I think that's where the Cats see him as a player that can play across the ground, but he's a small player too,
right, 178 centimeters. So that's
that's shorter than me, and I'm pretty short.
So, is this the? Well, let me ask you this question first, and I'll close with that one. Then, what club do you think had the best trade period?
If it wasn't us, it was definitely the Western Bulldogs.
Okay.
For the fact is, they kept Josh Dunkley, and they filled holes. Adam Treloar came to the club. They got the backup ruckman in Stephen Martin to help Tim English, and they got what's his name, Mitch Hannon from Melbourne as well too. But then also St Kilda, I think they did a pretty good job because again they filled the holes that they needed. They got a second-rate forward in Sean McKernan that's going to definitely back them up as well. They got Jack Higgins, who they needed another forward pocketer, and they got Brad Couch. They needed another inside midfielder. So I think Geelong, St Kilda, and the Western Bulldogs got exactly what they wanted out of the period. They filled all the holes they needed. And they're basically, 3 sides in that premiership window too. So it's always easier when you're in that window to probably get what you need because more players are more sold on what you're selling to them than probably say a Hawthorn at the moment or an Essendon who in a little bit in no man's land at the moment. But I think Essendon failed in getting what they wanted, which was good because we sort of don't like their list manager.
Is that
Dorio?
Yeah, I was going to say his last name begins with a D because I'd seen a lot of discussions about him online. A lot of people talking about him on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't mind the way he goes about it. He puts his players on a pretty high pedestal, and that's no problem. I think if I was a list manager at Geelong, I sometimes get a little bit frustrated with Stephen Wells. I think that he's a little bit too light. I think he's sort of, he sort of bucked at the GWS offer, but, the Tim Kelly deal, I sort of thought we could have got a decent player out of West Coast as well, but I guess as well too, we have a saying, in Wells we trust. That's a bit of a hashtag that we have in Geelong, and we end up didn't have it to lose a Brandon Parfitt or a Isava Radaglia in that deal. So I guess that's a bit of a win too. But yeah, sometimes I feel he sort of lets players go for a bit light. I thought Nakia Cockatoo's deal was a little bit, we put so much time in him. He was our only top 10 pick that we've had in the last decade. And let him go for, I think it was a future 4th rounder or something.
I think it's a third.
It was a little bit disheartening.
Yeah,
it was a little bit disheartening. I thought we could have maybe got Alex Witherden in that deal, but well. I think he's sort of, if a player wants to go and doesn't want to stay at Geelong, he lets it go. He lets him go.
Right, and I'm really bummed out about that because when I first came to the game a little over 4 years ago and really started to fall in love with the game, as I was figuring out which team I wanted to support, Nakia Cockatoo was actually the player that pushed me in the direction of the Cats because I put something on his Instagram page last week that because to me he kind of played with that bull in a china shop kind of action.
Yeah,
it was somebody who was going to knock you on your keister, and not think twice about it. And I hate to see him go. I wish him the best in Brisbane. Brisbane actually ended up on number 2 on my list of clubs that I was going to support. So it sort of worked out there. As I told him, I said I'm still going to be a Cockatoo fan, but I'm still a Cat supporter. Wish him the best. But
I think all of us Geelong fans are barracking for him. It's just sad. It's like the first game that he played for us was a pre-season game, and there was this extraordinary goal that he kicked. It was at Geelong against Adelaide, where he won the clearance. So we got the tap out, and he won the clearance, and he basically dodged 3 players and had a shot from 50 and nailed it. And we just all looked. I just remember there would have been about 6,000 or 7,000 at that game, and we all just sort of it was just silent, and we just thought, oh, look, this guy's going to be great.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a couple of patches. He kicked a goal, I think, early on in the 2017 season against Fremantle, right on the wing. It was over there, and then we found out 2 days later he broke his thumb and he missed the next 8 weeks. He just he walked under a ladder that had 6 black cats underneath it or something. He's just and then every time he was close,
yes,
he got injured again. And we sort of like, even this year we sort of waited with what he's. Yeah, we just like it's time. He's got to play, and yeah, it's just one that I think at the end of the day, it was like Daniel Menzel. You just had to cut ties with him. He spent too much time in the rehab, and yeah, we wish him well. And I'm a big Link McCarthy fan as well too, and he went up to Brisbane and he's done really well. He kicked that goal against us a couple of years ago to win the game, and I was I personally know Link, and he's been fantastic, and I just hope Nikaya as well just does really well up there too.
Yeah, I think he and Charlie Cameron together that's scary to think about.
Yeah, it is.
So much speed up there. That's frightening to think about. So
just hope he gets games, and
I do too.
And he's only recently become a dad too in the last couple of weeks. So
right.
Hopefully, his family and all that settles. I really thought he might have gone to Perth and played. He's good mates with Tim Kelly as well. So I was actually thinking that he might have gone to West Coast, but Brisbane was a bit of a left field thing.
Yeah,
but
somebody said that, and I didn't know that. I don't know that for sure, but somebody said he was from the Northern Territories.
Yeah. So the name Cockatoo is a pretty famous one up there. It's like Rioli. It's a pretty strong one. You go have a look at the players that play in the Northern Territory League. There would have been probably about 12, 13 that have got Cockatoo as their last name.
So let me ask you this. I've got two questions for you here to wrap up. I said, do you think that the club has enough now to finally overtake the Tigers? Because I don't care who else is going to be up in the top 4, that sort of thing. Until somebody beats Richmond, they're the Premiers. Until somebody beats them.
Yeah, I think we have every side covered except them. And I don't think it's about personnel. I think it's about game plan. And the 2 times we've lost to them, we've been in the finals. We've been in the exact position. Up at halftime, we've played such good footy. You've gone into halftime, gone and got that the beer, and you're just gone, we've got these guys. We've got them this time. And then it's the same thing. Third quarter, they just go into 5th gear and they take complete control of it. They erect what happened in the first 2 quarters. It's been a thing under Chris Scott is when the pressure gauge goes up, we crumble. We absolutely crumble, and I don't think we've addressed that. The only thing that you can address, you can't address it by personnel. You address it by game plan, and you address it by pre-season. You address by running and finishing off games. And this year we've been remarkable finishing off games. I think how many times were we 2 to 3 goals up on a side, and then next thing you know, we've won the game by 11, 12 goals.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping maybe with the Jeremy Cameron situation, the game, like Tom Hawkins has been irrelevant against Richmond. And that's the fact that Richmond has such a good defence. So you bring Jeremy Cameron in, hopefully it just, it means that either Hawkins or Jeremy Cameron can have a good game. It's similar the other way. Tom Lynch or Jack Riewoldt never play 2 good games against us. It's either one or the other.
Right.
So when you mentioned that, about those 2 players before, it's probably the same boat for us. But I guess Smith has a pretty good running capacity. But I think what Richmond also do is they bring in players that suit their demographics. So hopefully like a Jordan Clark comes in and brings that speed to the club. And then also, I still reckon we need another midfielder. And I think either Cooper Stevens or Charlie Constable can provide that as well too. But then who do you take out of that side as well?
Yeah, that's
Is it Selwood's time? Is it potentially that if we get to the end of the year and Selwood's not in our best 22, is that a good problem to have?
I had that discussion, in one of the last episodes that, if, for example, I was talking about, Gary Ablett. I said, if he's not, if he's not your best 22, I said, even if he's not, you can't not play him. He has to be on the grounds regardless. It's if he's healthy. This is before he hurt his shoulder. I said, if he's healthy, he's got to be out there, whether he should be or not. In terms of where he is on the 22, he's going to be out there just because of his last name.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues, I think, with our selection policy is it is selected by name a lot of the time. If you think back when Geelong were at their peak this season, so that window where we bet North Melbourne, we bet Port Adelaide, we bet St Kilda, we bet Adelaide, we bet Essendon. Have a think of who was playing and who wasn't. There was no Selwood and there was no Gary Ablett. And I love Joel Selwood. I love Joel Selwood. He's been sensational, but and he preserved his body for the finals. If it wasn't for that finger injury, I reckon he would have a bigger impact. But if you go back next year, we're going to have potentially a full season again. I just wonder with him. There's nowhere else you can play him. You can't play him as a half-back flanker. You can't play him as a forward pocketer. He's an in and under midfielder. You can potentially play him on the wing, but he's a bit slow for that position, especially against Richmond. Yeah, I just maybe this could have been the year he hung up the boots, or potentially just gave the captaincy over to maybe a Tom Stewart, let him flourish under that role, and then potentially it's not as hard to drop him or leave him out. We did it back in 2007 with Stephen King. We gave it over to Tom Harley, and you saw that. It sort of took the shoulders off King, and Geelong were able to probably potentially play Brad Orton's a bit more on the ruck. Okay. But then you never know. Selwood might come back and have a blistering pre-season, and this is his last dance like Michael Jordan did in that documentary, and he has this phenomenal season and finishes on the high as a premiership captain.
That would be if he decides to go, that would be terrific. Now, is this the most optimistic that you've been as a Cat supporter since the last premiership?
No, there's been a few ones. I think 2013 I was pretty buoyant about that year, and then 2019 too. So both years we lost the prelims by, we should have beaten Hawthorn, we should have beaten Richmond, but both those years I had this feeling that would come out really well. I think was it 2019 we got Gary Rowan and Dalhouse, and we kept Tim Kelly. I think all the cards were aligned with us that year, and then we sort of had a loss during the second half of the year, and then we sort of just became reactionary to that and we changed our game plan and we weren't attacking.
And if Hawkins had kept his elbows to himself, they probably played the grand final.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Or if we played a ruckman in a qualifying final, potentially when it was supposed to rain, we probably wouldn't have had to face Richmond in a prelim. We would have had the Giants on a Saturday and we probably would have knocked them off too.
That's true, yeah.
All those possibilities. If Paul Chapman didn't jump up and knock out Robbie Gray in the 2013 semi-final, we probably would have beaten Hawthorn and kept the curse running. And then we would have beaten Fremantle in the grand final. All those, it's just the life of a footy supporter.
Exactly.
We had the 90s to deal with, mate, and we had lost all those grand finals. We had that little window where we won flags, and then we're back to being the could have beens, the should have beens.
Right. Okay, well,
but I am optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I'm up and about. It's only November. It's sort of hard to imagine what March is going to bring, mate.
Well, look at the bright side. We've got very soon we've got the AFLW getting started. You're going to have hopefully games that you can commentate as well. Here pretty soon too. So, ladies and gents, I want to thank Max Blake for taking time out of his morning to come on and talk all things Geelong and the trade period. And Max, it was great to have you on. I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me on. It was great. Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, if you'd like to sign up for the mailing list so that you get each new episode delivered to you first, there's a link to a short form in the show notes. If you'd like to sign up, I'd love to add you to the list. And don't forget to check out the podcast storefront. I will put a link to the show note in the show notes as well, so you can check that out if you'd like to. Also, If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast and you'd like to talk about your club's off-season in an upcoming episode, we kind of moved past the trade deadline, but I'd surely like to talk about that. I know it's been a couple of weeks ago. Please feel to reach out to me on Twitter at yank_on, or send me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast page on Facebook as well. I'm still hoping to talk to supporters from a number of clubs. I have a couple irons in the fire, but I'm hoping to talk to somebody from West Coast and GWS and Fremantle and Richmond, Adelaide and Gold Coast. Although I think I have a Sun supporter lined up, I've just not been able to make a connection with them. The Saints, as well as the Kangaroos, who have made tremendous changes. I'd love to hear from a Roos supporter as far as what they think. I believe I have the Hawk Talk podcast that wants to possibly link up and come on for a little while to talk about the Hawks as well as the D's and the Bulldogs. And Frode, if you're listening, I'd probably like to talk to you, sir, but I'd also like to talk to some other Bulldogs fans as well. So if you're a supporter of even one of the other 7 clubs that I've spoken to, I'd still love to hear from you, because I want to hear what your thoughts are on the off-season. And by the time you probably get in touch with me when we set things up, the draft will have been finished as well. So I'd love to hear what you think. And if you've got an idea for a show topic, or you know someone that you think would be a great guest, drop me a DM on Twitter or shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And just a reminder that, you can find all the episodes for the podcast at yankonthefooty.podbean.com. You can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. Every episode is also available on my YouTube channel. Just search out my name, Craig Wessels. And now that you've listened, I'd love it if you'd consider giving me a review on Apple Podcasts. It lets me know what I need to work on. Lets me know what I'm doing well, if I'm doing something well. I mean, I'd love your honesty. If I get a 5-star review, that's fantastic. But I would appreciate honesty more than anything. Okay? Now, if I'm lousy, maybe send me a DM and say, hey, you're lousy. You may want to hold off that 1 star for a little while. But, if that's what you feel, that's okay. I can live with that. And it lets the podcast host know what you think of the show as well. Okay? Now, don't forget that you can reach me, as I said before, at yankonthefooty@gmail.com, as well as on Twitter at yank_on. And you can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook at @yankonthefooty. And before I wrap up tonight, I want to also thank Mr. Joseph McDade for the use of a couple pieces of his music. Mr. McDade's created some fantastic music, and I'm using Elevation and Backplate. Although I must say I've been fiddling around on GarageBand, working at creating my own bumper music. So I may, with the first anniversary episode, introduce some new opening and closing music. Nothing to slight Mr. McDade at all, but I just thought it would be nice to try a little bit different music. Okay. I may find something else of his that I like as well. I have to go back to his website. So again, you can find his work at josephmcdade.com/music. He's also on Spotify. So again, sir, thanks so very much. And again, if you haven't done so yet, I invite you to, sign up for the mailing list and maybe check out the storefront. And do me a favor, if you would, if you think it's worthy of doing so, share the podcast with your friends and family. Okay? Ladies and gents, I want to thank you for listening, because while we're fans of our teams, deep down we're fans of the game that we love, and that's footy. And yes, there have been some rule changes, which I'm going to get into in an upcoming episode here. But we can't wait for the season to start. We can't wait for the AFLW to start. I'm excited about that. I can't wait to see what happens here in the AFLW season. So looking forward to that getting going. I've not watched cricket other than a couple times. I really don't understand the game that well, and I'm looking forward to some AFLW action going on here. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, thanks so very much, and I ask you to share the podcast with your friends and family. And may your dribble kick never, ever hit the post. I'll catch you later. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode number 61 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter, or at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. Again, thanks for listening, and please consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.